All right. Well, I hope everyone is doing well today. And here momentarily, we'll go ahead and begin our presentation for today on the Capital Maintenance and Improvements Grants. And a very significant thank you to the Tennessee State Museum for putting this program together for us today. My name is Charles Googe. I'm the president of the Tennessee Association of Museums. And the mission of the Tennessee Association of Museums is to empower Tennessee museums to inspire, engage, and connect to their audiences and communities. And a wonderful way that we're able to partner with the efforts of the state of Tennessee and the Tennessee State Museum is to put on this webinar where our representatives, led by Ashley Howell, the director of the Tennessee State Museum, will be telling us about different ways that the state has in prior authorizations, as well as the current round authorized funding for capital projects to support all sorts of different projects to help the infrastructure of museums across the state of Tennessee. And so with that, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Ashley Howell, the director of the Tennessee State Museum, to tell us a little bit more about the Capital Maintenance and Improvements Grant round for the 2024 and 2025 period. And if anybody has any questions during the Q&A portion that Debbie Shaw will be helping us out with, feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat for us, and we'll get to those here towards the end of our presentation. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the illustrious Ashley Howell, Director of the Tennessee State Museum.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Charles. I just wanted to say for the second year, the State Museum is fortunate to be able to facilitate a capital grant program for museums on behalf of the Tennessee legislature. Last year was our first year, and from that, we've compiled some tips, some things we learned, some things we learned about you, and also have made a couple of slight changes to the program for this year. But one of the things I just wanted to remind you is you are the experts of your institutions. So this is a way we can help you bring the best application to the State Museum so we can continue to facilitate funding to help museums across the state. So we are glad to partner with the Tennessee Association of Museums to bring this to you. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Debbie Shaw.
And Debbie, you're on mute, Debbie.
You're on mute.
I am so sorry. Sorry, I wanted to let everybody know that on this slide, we're just gonna kind of show some of the different people that are going to be talking and presenting during the presentation today. So we had Charles and Ashley, and then a few other of us from the State Museum as part of the granting committee. Let's see. I'm just kind of starting off with a few tips for the webinar in general. Please stay muted unless you're asked to unmute and you have a specific question. For those questions, please add it into the chat section. Sabrina Hooper and I will be monitoring that, and we will do our best to get to everybody's questions before the webinar is over. If you have something and you're kind of uncomfortable putting it into the overall chat, you can look for my name or the Tennessee Association of Museum kind of line item when you drop down, and you can send that question and that'll only come to me. So you can ask that, and I promise not to call you out about who it came from if you want to keep that on the down low. If the question gets really, really specific to your museum or gets really, really detailed, we might ask you to kind of put that one on pause, and we'll contact you separately later so that we can go into more of a deep dive on your question. The webinar is being recorded, so please keep that in mind. After today's webinar, I am going to send out this PowerPoint to everybody that was registered. The PowerPoint and the link for the recording will go out to everybody, but it'll also be on the Tennessee Association of Museums website. So you'll be able to access this at any time. And for the most part, like, don't be shy. When it's your turn to talk or something, if we ask you to unmute, please turn on your cameras. We'd love to see your smiling faces. So thanks so much. And I'll turn this over to Tammy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tammy Edwards, Director of Special Projects at the State Museum. And I have probably emailed with you all or talked to you on the phone, or maybe I've met you in person. So I'm glad to see so many people here. And to get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened with the grant program last year, and then we'll talk about some of the changes we've got coming up for this cycle. So as Ashley mentioned, last year was the first time that we had this grant program. And as you know, we received $5 million from the Tennessee General Assembly to give out grants. We received 170 applications with requests totaling more than $12 million. And 108 museums were approved for funding. Next slide, please. So if you take a look at this pie chart, you can see that the operating budgets of the museums that were funded. So about 75% went to museums with operating budgets under $500,000. If you look on your right, you can see that probably about 40-something% went to museums with budgets of less than $100,000. So we were really grateful and proud to be able to support so many museums, but particularly so many small museums from rural counties with small budgets that are still doing great things in their communities. Next slide, please. So some of the projects that were funded were accessibility upgrades. So that could have been bathroom upgrades, ramps, accessible parking lots. We funded roof replacements, HVAC replacements, lighting, windows, flooring, gutters, foundation repairs, and some other things. Next slide, please. So important dates to look at. The grant announcement went out last Monday on the 17th on our website, and we're also going to be sending out postcards to museums. I think 300 to 400 museums are going to get postcards with information about the grant. But if you know some museums that maybe haven't heard of it, you can share the knowledge, or that could be competition for you, so you might not want to share. But anyway, we want as many people to know about the grant program as possible. The application is going to actually open next Monday on July 1st, which is the beginning of the new fiscal year for the state. The application deadline for this year is August 26th, midnight, Central Standard Time. So if you're in a different time zone, please make a note of that. Funding decisions will be emailed to the executive director and maybe the person that writes the grant, but for sure to the executive director on October 14th. Something new this year, the deadline to respond to the approval email is November 15th. And we added that because we don't want to repeat what happened this year, which was, folks were notified in November, and some museums we still hadn't heard from in January. So we're reaching out to them to make sure that they knew that they had been funded. So we want you to respond as soon as you get that approval email. The deadline for the project to be completed, that's going to be June 30th, 2025. That's the end of the state's fiscal year. And again, the deadline for the final financial report is going to be September 30th, 2025. So once your project is completed and you've spent all the money, you can get that report to us on or before September 30th. My audio went out. Thanks. All right, so let's get into the weeds of what to expect for this cycle. Next slide, Debbie. Next slide, Debbie. Thank you, girl. Okay, so some of the changes for this year. We learned a lot, as Ashley mentioned, from last year. So we made a couple of changes, but not too many. There is one additional question. If you applied last year, you might remember there were 4 short answer questions, and this year we've got 5. and a couple different requirements. So the questions for this year are going to be, and again, the application will be live next Monday, but the questions will be, we want to know what your mission is. We want you to tell us how your museum meets the definition of a museum. We want to know how you engage with the community. We want you to describe your project and rank your project or your project steps. And that means if you're submitting with multiple items, maybe rank what comes first, what's a priority for you, or perhaps rank if something needs to happen before another thing can happen. So for instance, if your roof needs to be fixed before you can do the floors or something like that, make note of that in your application. Let's see. Oh, and the last question will be, how will this project further your mission? And a couple other requirements this year, or a couple of other changes. Once you've submitted your application for this year's cycle, you cannot resubmit. So it's going to be important for you to make sure you talk to whoever's involved, make sure you get all the approvals you need, and everyone needs to look at it that needs to approve it, get all that done before you submit. You won't be able to resubmit. And we need you to submit 3 completed years of your operating budget. So however your budget is, if it's a fiscal year or calendar year, we want the last 3 completed operating budgets. Next slide, please. Let's see. So everyone that submits an application, we want you to go ahead and submit your W-9 with the application. That should help cut down on some time. If you were funded, you know there were some issues with the W-9, and Sabrina's going to talk about that a little bit more when she talks about tips, but everyone will need to submit their W-9 with the application. Let's see. If you submit as a nonprofit with a 501c3, you must include your IRS letter of determination. All of the required documents must be submitted with the application. So we don't want you to submit some stuff and then try to email some stuff to us or send it in the mail. Everything must be submitted with the application. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be a deadline for the museums to respond. I said that in the last slide. So that should help things. If you respond like that, we can begin the process a little bit quicker, and you can get your funding a little bit quicker. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that you have to submit the W-9. So one of the things that's going to be very important is that your information is correct to the T. So if you see on the left-hand side, the W-9, whatever the name of your organization is on that W-9, that's what you need to put on the application for the name of your organization. So make sure that that matches. And then that second line that will be on the application, the name of the museum, if it's different, that could be if you're submitting, let's say you're a historical society, but you're submitting the application on behalf of the Tammy Edwards Museum, which sounds amazing. You can put that on that second line, but on that first line, you need to put exactly what's on the W-9. I hope that makes sense. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lori, and she's going to tell you all about Title VI.
Thank you, Tammy, and greetings to everyone. I am the Tennessee State Museum's Title VI coordinator. My name is Lori, and we're just going to do a brief overview of what Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is and how that will impact your part of the application process in terms of submitting the application and then if you are awarded. So in front of you, you will see a slide which reviews the law of Title VI. It is a federal law, and it essentially protects our visitors from discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin when participating in our programs and services. Next slide, please, Debbie. And then on this slide, you can see the hierarchy of how the law follows from the federal government down to the organizations that will receive this grant. So essentially, as a state agency, we are required to be in compliance with the law, both as part of the federal law, but then the state laws that are part of that process for us in the state of Tennessee. And so essentially that means that organizations that receive funds from us must also be compliant with Title VI. Next slide, please. And so these are just the most valuable pieces of information you need to know. First is that all organizations or museums that are funded through this grant in this cycle will need to go through the Title VI training process. So even if you received a grant last year, you will need to go through Title VI training again. It's an annual process. Also, if funded, when you receive your award letter, you will receive a Title VI survey. Be sure to complete that honestly and get it back to us right away. You're not required to be compliant when you submit your grant, but you are required to be compliant before you receive your funds. So send us that form honestly in terms of where you are right now. Once you send us that survey, we're able then to identify resources that might be helpful to you, and we will get those free resources out to you, and we'll meet with you to discuss that process. And then also you will receive an assurance form that you will be required to fill out and complete, get back to us. And once you get that assurance back to us, then we can process your grant funds. So both of those forms will be important to getting those grant funds in the end. And then finally, I just want to emphasize again that there is no stress in this process. We've got you. We've got the resources for you. So just complete the process, and then we'll get those funds to you after you've assured us of your compliance with the assurance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lori. And I'd just like to share that we all have to go through Title VI training every year. So because we get federal funding, so we go through the training, the stuff that we're asking you to do, we have to do it as well. So then I'm going to talk to you about some of the examples of some of the things that are eligible for funding and some of the things that are ineligible. And this is not a comprehensive list. It's just an example to give you some ideas. So if you look right here on your left, some of the eligible projects, roof replacements, the things that I just mentioned that we funded. So flooring, HVAC, ADA upgrades, gutters, structural upgrades, and masonry work. And then some of the things that are, some examples of things that are not eligible for funding: land acquisition, programs, the purchase of artifacts, any kind of payments or stipends. This is not for operating support, computers, web design, moving expenses, or for vehicles. Next slide, please. I think I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina, and she's going to talk to you about some tips for applying this year.
Okay. Hi, everyone. There's some tips for applying for the grant this year. The first couple of them are just going to be some basic housekeepings. So basically, when you're ready to apply for your grant, just gather all of the documents that are needed together. You can either put it in a file on your desktop or, just in a file where you can keep them and know what you are submitting for, and then keep that on hand after you've done the submission, just to have that with you. FormStack is going to be the method for applying again, and it does not have spell check. So the tip is to write everything out on a Word document so that you can look at your word counts and that you can keep your spelling correctly and your grammar correctly. What happens when we get down to the final submissions and things like that, sometimes that could be a break to who gets the grant and who doesn't if we're overextended. Have somebody proofread it for you. Make sure you have all of the approvals at the highest level. So we're not having to resubmit if we need to, because we can't accept a resubmission. So make sure your highest authority has received approval and they know what you're applying for. Okay. All applications are required to be submitted in one packet with all required documents, and they need to be submitted by 11:59 Central Time, August the 26th. I know that we're repeating this, but we just don't want anybody to miss out. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're still going to be utilizing the TSM grants at tn.gov email. Please make sure that that is a trusted source on your emails. When we send out the announcements on October 14th, we will be using that email to send out the announcements. So please have your appointing authority check their junk or spam mail. It is coming out on that date. Okay. So be looking for that if you do a submission. Several people are monitoring that email, so any question that you have, that will be the fastest way to get a hold of us, is using the email. And then we'll be able to respond. One of us will respond. When emailing us, please use that full name of your organization, that legal name, so that's how we're going to file you and be able to get to you quickly with your resources that you've sent to us. And again, I wanted to emphasize, if you are submitting multiple projects, please prioritize them. And if one is contingent upon the other, then let us know that in the application. And that is because you may only receive partial funding, and we want to make sure that you're going to be able to complete whatever project that we fund for you. Next slide. Okay, so projects still will be due June 30th of 2025. So that's why if you have multiple projects, be thinking about those that can be completed by this time. We understand that there's weather and contracts informations and all of that, but please try to pick those contracts where you think you can get it done in the time. With that, we're strongly, not required, but we're strongly encouraging quotes this year. This will also help you with completing your budget, and it will also help you secure contractors earlier in the process. So if you can get those in, we think that that will be a help for you. And once you get your budget, please do not ask for above your budget support. So do not ask for funding that is not supported by your budget. Okay. And one final reminder, as we're doing this recording, and as people will still be sending us email inquiries, just the submitting of your application or getting feedback to us does not mean that you're going to receive the funding. Okay, so I think that's all I have.
Hey, it's me again, y'all. So Lori and I are going to talk to you a little bit about good grantsmanship. Both of us have been grants managers and have written grants. So these are some tips that we think will help you. So the first one is to vet your idea with all the other people that are involved and get all the approvals, like Sabrina just said. So everybody's on the same page about what you're applying for. And one of the things that I always did when I started writing a grant was I read over the application in its entirety. So I suggest you do that so you know exactly what's required. You can share it with other folks so people can start getting together information that will go into the, that can help you answer your questions. And Sabrina said, gather all your required documents and just keep them at the ready. And that's just a good way to be grant ready for any other grants you might be writing. So you've already got your budgets together, and some of the answers to these questions might be able to, you could kind of use those to answer other grant questions. So keep all those documents in the same place so you know where they are. A big suggestion, write everything in a Word document, and then you can share it with people, and you can just copy and paste it into our application. And that way people can proof it, they can edit it, they can make changes and things, and then you can just go ahead and put it in your application. And I know we've talked about this a lot, but spell check is super important. it's just a part of good grantsmanship. So Lori, I'll let you take over the last couple.
Thank you, Tammy. Yes, so definitely proofread. Um, the in terms of the final tips, also just be sure that your project aligns with your mission and that your answers are detailed enough for us as the reviewers to know what's important to your project. Essentially, grant writing is an exercise in persuasive writing. So you are explaining what you need the money for and justifying it. So just make sure that all of those line up together. And then also be accurate in your application when presenting those justifications. The very final question on the application is for you to initial that everything is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. Essentially, these are state funds that are being entrusted to organizations. And so it's just important that you represent how you're going to spend those funds accurately. Thank you.
And I would say one other thing just to say here, the application has character restrictions, I believe, not word restrictions. So that means you really just got to get to the meat of what you're saying. And as I used to say, sometimes you can't put in some of the fluff that you might want, but you just need to get what you need to say in the characters that you can say it in. So let's see. Y'all, I'm trying to multitask. I can't look at the test, the chat and all this. So you'll have another 4 more opportunities to connect with us if you've got questions. So we're going to do what we're calling office hours on Zoom, and there will be a link available for that. But on July 29th, it'll just be a couple of us on a Zoom, and we'll just be kind of sitting around. And if you want to pop in and ask us a question or listen to other questions, we will be available on the 29th, on July 29th, as well as August 12th, once in the morning from 10 to 12 Central Standard Time, and then in the afternoon from 1 to 3 Central Standard Time. So July 9th and August 12th. Next slide.
And Tammy, I was going to add one more thing. We will be sending out those Zoom links for everybody that's registered here today. So that's how you'll be able to access those office hours.
Okay. And they'll be on our website too, I assume. Okay, next slide. Well, that's it. If you need to reach us, as Sabrina mentioned, we're still using the tsmgrants@tn.gov email, so you can ask us questions there. You can pop into the Zoom if you need to. If you've got questions here, Debbie is looking in the chat, and whoever can answer the question, just jump in. All right, Debbie.
All right. So we had one question about, would maintenance of a historic carousel fall under the parameters of this grant?
Maintenance of a historic carousel. I don't know. Ashley, what do you think? Is that something that would fall under the parameters?
So I think for this question, we would need some more information. So I, you know, is this, you know, how does this serve the museum? Which of course, you know, I could see some answers to that. You know, is it, you know, an artifact? Is it a structure? You know, I think we just need some more information, because it could be artifact conservation, but could also fall under the capital maintenance umbrella. So if there's I would say, you know, we can talk offline about that. but more information there is key.
All right, thanks, Ashley. I've got another one here that has to do with, can you use the grant for outside exhibits maintenance? They've got an 1800s dog trot cabin, a blacksmith shop that needs roof repairs, things like that. Is that something that falls within these parameters?
That sounds like something that falls in the parameters to me. What else you got?
I mean, honestly, we are caught up on questions right now. Is anybody else have anything they want to add to the chat? We've got them online here. Ashley, Tammy, they're ready.
Maybe we did such a great job, there aren't any more questions.
Are electric scooters for access something that would fall into the maintenance grant?
That doesn't sound like something that might be, I'm not sure. I guess, this from Mary Nita. Hi, Mary Nita. That would be for your guests, like to have one just to loan out to guests. Is that what you're talking about? Yes.
Okay, we had another one. What about security system upgrades?
So we have funded security system updates. So that is something we have funded with this past round. I would say, just again, in the application and in the preparation of the application, more information is key. And I know some of the questions coming through, it may not be something we funded before, like electric scooters. I think that's, so that's where the team would need to kind of discuss and look at applications and, how needs kind of rise up out of the applications. But for any questions you have once the grant opens, the office hours will be key, just to kind of pop it and ask the question. We'll have a chance to review some of the information, the questions have come in, but also TSM grants at tn.gov to set up a time to talk with us either on the phone or we can also email.
All right, I've had a few more specifics come in. One is an 1800s one-room schoolhouse, and would updates to that building be applicable? Which I think falls into some of the other answers we've given, that it really depends on where that falls in your mission and what part of that museum is. But I'll let Ashley expand on that if she'd like. But I think with a lot of these specifics, it's really going to depend on the information you can provide with the grant.
Sorry, trying to unmute. Again, I'll just, tell us about your institution, tell us about your museum, tell us your mission. We have funded repairs to historic structures. And I would just say, if anybody has a structure that is on the National Register, also confer with the Tennessee Historical Commission just to make sure any repairs that you're planning to do doesn't jeopardize the National Register application and designation.
Okay, one more that came in here. If an operations project is not funded this cycle, can it be resubmitted in future years? So I guess that could also apply to if there was something that wasn't funded in the last cycle, could it be funded this time.
Possibly. It kind of depends on what it is and, um, you know, so that's my answer, possibly. And I will say here too, we don't know how often we're gonna get this funding. We find out at the end of the session. That's when we found out this year. So we don't know if this is going to be a year by year thing. So my answer to that is possibly. I don't know. What do you think, Ashley?
Yeah, I would say we have already received many questions if institutions can resubmit if last year we had close to I think it's about 60 institutions that did not get funded. We are encouraging museums to resubmit, to reevaluate their application and to resubmit. Also, if you were funded last year, we do encourage people to look at their priority list and to resubmit, but we will be looking at museums that were not funded in the previous cycle. And so just looking at the needs across the state, looking at the needs of institutions, this is, your time to, tell us about that need and why this funding would be important to advance your mission, and, how it can kind of help you think about the future. In terms of, I just want to be clear with an operations project, making sure it's not an operational needs and that this is capital. So something like roofs, HVAC, collection care, several of the things on the list that Tammy had mentioned, because even though we had the grant last year and talked about capital needs, we did receive some applications that outlined some operational needs. So just making sure that's very clear in your application that this is for capital.
And I would say too, as Sabrina mentioned, to do your best to get some kind of estimate or quote to give you a better idea of what to ask for. Because if you've got like $10,000-$20,000 left over, you definitely overestimate it, and so that'll be helpful to you and to other folks that are applying. And I just saw a question about a cash match, and no, there's not a cash match is not required. We did our best to create an application and a process that was not too terribly complicated. We know there are museums out there that might be run by one person or just a group of volunteers. So we tried to keep it as accessible to you all, so you could actually have the time to do the grant and the project. So we know that cash matches can be difficult, so that is not a requirement.
And I've had another question. Could somebody kind of speak to the documentation that's required at the end of the grant, like what those final reports are going to look like or what they would require?
Yeah, I can do that. I did see that question. We're asking for a financial report outlining all of the grant expenses. We did provide some templates. You don't have to use those, but they were just some templates to kind of help you see what we're looking for. We want you to show us how you spent all of the money that we provided to you. And if you used some of your funding to complete the project, then you would just split those up. So capital grant paid for this, and then we had to spend money over here to complete the project, and then show all of the copies of the invoices where the money was spent. And then the final thing is to have a notarized letter that says, yes, this is true and accurate that we were spent that way, and have that signed in front of a notary. And then you can email all of that to us as well.
And I will say one question that came up a few times, and I put an answer in the chat, but in case you didn't see it, if you do want to like talk offline about this, you have any questions, the email on the website right now, this tsmgrants@tn.gov, is the best place to send those questions into. As they were explaining earlier, there's a team of folks that see that, and they'll be able to get back with you about any of your questions.
And remember to attend the office hours.
Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have. Do you see any more, Debbie?
I think we are all caught up, and I did throw the Tennessee State Museum grant website into the chat, so you can find that there. And again, we'll send that out to everybody as well.
July 1st, it's Canada Day. It's also the release of this application. That just popped up on my calendar. So be looking on our website. I think we can end with Charles. Do you want to close things up
Sure.
with Charles?
Absolutely. Well, just to wrap us up for the day, a big thank you to everyone for attending the webinar and to the Tennessee State Museum for making this legislative effort now accessible to us. We very much appreciate what the Tennessee State Museum is doing to make this, again, accessible for a variety of projects at your museum. They're very responsive. They want to hear from you. So if you have any questions about it, don't miss out on those office hours. Be sure to email them at tsmgrants@tn.gov. And thank you again to Ashley, Tammy, Lori, Sabrina, and Debbie for all you do for us here. And we very much look forward to seeing what projects lie on the horizon for us for Tennessee museums.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you for letting us use your Zoom account.
Anytime. You are always welcome.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Debbie, you have anything else? If not,
No, just thanks for being here, and we're excited to start reading through your grants.
All right. All right. Well, bye, everybody.
Thanks all.
Have a
Thanks,
great day, all.